when the idea kind of first came to us, which wasn't a mind-blowing idea or super revolutionary, it was basically just like, oh, what if during a set break there was a brand here? It seems like this kind of dead space, half an hour, and it's hard to stand out. And you mentioned attention. Most brands, when they're going after this audience, are on social, and that's skippable. What if you could align your brand with someone's best night of the week, month, year? Like this could be it. And your brand was there for it. Focused attention in a live environment can be worth up to 69 times more than a social impression. When you see something in one of those places, it's going to get your attention a lot more.
All right. Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. I'm your host, Jon Wallett, and we have a fun and exciting episode today. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how live music venues are creating a powerful and exciting alternative to digital advertising, very much by prioritizing authenticity and that real world connection that we're all seeking in this world of AI at the moment. And, today we're going to be talking to the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Venue Ad Network, Jared McCarthy. So welcome to the podcast, Jared.
Thanks for having me, John. Great to be here.
Dude, I'm really excited for this one because this is not just an interesting, I think what you're doing is not just interesting in terms of the landscape, but it's a passion point of mine. Music has been part of my DNA since I was a child. So I'm very eager to pick your brain. And, here at the AdTech Heroes podcast, we usually kick things off because we are focused on the person, on your kind of hero's journey, right? So I'd love to start there. I'd love to better understand, how your career got started, like what first sparked your interest in advertising, like how did we get to you today as the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Venue Ad Network?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting here and doing. We refer to it as Van, just to be a bit tongue in cheek and a bit self-referential and meta about the fact that, especially indie bands are driving around in a van. I certainly have done that. But yeah, Van is a culmination really of my career in media, mainly at media agencies in New York. And it's on top of that, I've had a career / just a lot of experience in bands playing music. So finally, this is sort of the culmination of those two things, which I had been throughout my career and throughout my adult life, been figuring out a way to kind of combine those two things. So I started in media at OMD and over 20 years ago now, which is insane. Just kind of coming out of college, I just knew I wanted to work in a creative industry. I liked the idea of advertising. I love pop culture. I love entertainment. I feel like advertising just captures all of those things, and it's a relatively stable career path, but it does allow for creativity and just kind of irreverent thinking, and it's not finance, which a lot of my friends were getting into at the time. So yeah, I did that. I did media planning for 15 years in New York City and for various brands, everything from Diageo and Brown-Forman, so liquor side of things, to a lot of entertainment brands. Worked on.
I'm noticing a connection between music and liquor just right off the
Yeah,
top.
exactly. So yeah, entertainment was another huge category of mine that I worked in, mainly HBO. I actually worked for HBO 3 separate times in my career at their media agency. So helped launch Game of Thrones, Boardwalk Empire, and a bunch of others in sort of the heyday of HBO's, before streaming really came along and started to dominate everything. Yeah, and since then worked on YouTube and a couple of other big clients at different agencies. Jumped around a bit. Moved to Maine in 2020. Unexpectedly, which is where my wife and I are both from. Worked at a creative agency here called Via, which was an amazing experience. Awesome independent agency. There was able to kind of refine my media planning and media strategy skills into a bit more like brand strategy, comm strategy. So a bit more like higher level thinking there. And yeah, after Via is when really started Van.
Well, I love that. Thanks for sharing some of that history. I think what strikes me with your story a little bit just off the jump is, I think a lot of people feel like in our industry, you get caught up in this singular profile, right? This is my bucket. This is what I know. I know media planning, and here you are after all those years of doing that work. You made this massive pivot. So I just like that that's part of the equation here. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that piece, and then I have a few questions regarding Van itself. But what was that stress or that transition period when you're reaching out beyond the confines of what you traditionally have been doing? Like, how did you handle that, work through that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really talk about the music angle of things, but I always thought it was important to just keep doing what I love, and I love writing music, I love playing, I love performing. I play mainly guitar and sing, and I noodle around with everything else. So that was just something I always did on the side, like always played in bands throughout my adult life from college through into New York, and that kind of kept that passion alive. But yeah, when I was in about 2013, while I was working at PhD, an Omnicom agency in New York, I was in a band called Panama Wedding, and it ended up kind of taking off at a time when blogs were big, and it sort of organically took off on a bunch of blogs out of New York and Brooklyn. And so from there, was able to I left advertising world for a couple years because we got signed and we were able to tour the country and play Jimmy Kimmel. And I kind of had this little moment for a, flash in the pan sort of synth pop Brooklyn band. But all that to say is I think allowing myself the opportunity to do what I love, and making sure I kept that a priority. And I think I just always knew that music would be such an integral part of my life. So I kind of just went where the wind was blowing, where I felt like the opportunities were arising. And I knew, when I left to really pursue the band for a few years, I knew that wasn't going to be a lifelong thing. It was just a once in a lifetime opportunity. And years later, it's still, is paying dividends in terms of just at least being able to have that experience under my belt, playing a lot of the independent venues that are now part of our network. So just having that experience along with the advertising has really allowed for some cool things to happen. And I'm just open to these things happening. And I never once went into advertising or went into my career being like, this is how it's going to work. This is who I'm going to be. These are the steps I'm going to, climb.
And right, you're saying you were following, your heart. And I also think, one of the questions I have for you is, as you were a band on the road and experiencing, Jim Kimmel and all these things, what problem did you actually see in the marketplace that right now, for Van, you feel like you're solving that issue for indie bands, for local bands? To me, I'd done some research and I saw that, coming out of the pandemic, there was this appetite for live music, which it sounds like you were able to capitalize or jump on, right? So talk to me a little bit about like what were the mechanisms or the issues in place that you were seeing that led you now to Van? Like how did you go from this passion project or this, what you truly cared about and turn that into, livelihood? So walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few kind of ways in. One, as an advertiser, the problems that I saw, and then as a musician. So from a musician's standpoint, indie venues in particular, which, indie venues can range from, a 90 cap room to 15,000. But what they're not is they're not, a Live Nation venue. They're not typically stadium arena venues. They're locally owned by a small group of people, and not so much like a corporation that is might not be in that from that particular city or even that particular country. Um, Independent venues are where musicians get their start, no matter who they are. One of the things we like to kind of point out is one of our venues in our network is Subterranean in Chicago. Capacity is 350. About 2 years ago, Chapel Roan was headlining that room. Less than a year later, she had the biggest set in Lollapalooza history, over 120,000 people. And you can list countless others who have that same story. And what we were seeing was a lot of these venues were getting either bought up or were closed, or struggling just due to bigger venues coming in, taking all the live acts, which then in turn does not allow for bands that are either starting out or even more well established bands to play as much as they'd like. And that has become such a consistent revenue stream for bands. I mean, they're not making the money they were. They obviously aren't selling CDs, and it's not, the 90s where that's the sort of main income stream. So touring is a lot of their income. And independent venues in particular, certainly I saw this 10 plus years ago. There are these amazing local institutions, beloved. I mean, here in Portland, Maine, we have the State Theater, Thompson's Point. We've got a bunch more that people just absolutely love, and they're part of the fabric of the city. And it was always really fun to be in, Vancouver's version of that, or whatever, Tulsa. And it felt like it feels special to be in those spots.
Yeah, like some of my fondest memories are like the local indie venues, right? So, to your point there, it sounds like you guys came into it looking at it from the perspective of you want to tap into kind of grassroots again, right? That feeling of connectivity.
Yeah, we wanted to tap into grassroots. We saw an opportunity for venues to be a little more open for additional revenue streams. That really came about in 2020. There was the Save Our Stages Act, which was passed through Congress through the National Independent Venue Association, which was formed, NEVA, which we're members of. Well, they were kind of the first people we spoke to when we had this idea, and they were totally on board with it. $16 billion federal arts grant sailed through Congress, like bipartisan support, like stuff that just doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah. When does that go down? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was basically like everybody loves these institutions, independent ones specifically. They are local economic drivers. They're obviously, arts and culture and just critical pieces of what makes America and these cities so unique. So that right there is proof enough that these are so important to people. Not to mention the audience size, that 1 in 3 people are going to independent venues when they're seeing a show. It's a huge kind of untapped audience. And I bring all that up just because these venues, while the attendance is as high as ever, they're struggling financially. They're not making the money they used to. Obviously, operating costs just for life, for anyone personally is higher, but certainly for venues, people aren't drinking as much alcohol. That's where they made a lot of their money. So when we approached them with this idea, there was certainly a part of us that were like, they could just tell us to F off. um, and just like, these are not spaces where we want big, advertisers to come in. But our pitch is very much like, we want to be additive. We want to find the right brands to bring in here. And then we split the revenue, meaning the majority of the ad revenue goes to these venues. So for them, it's really like a passive income stream. Part of our promise to them is that we're as low lift as possible for them. Some of these venues, they have some have sponsorship teams, some have, an advertising kind of group of people. Others, it's like the owner is cleaning the toilets, you know, and setting up the band and dealing with all the gear. Like, they don't have time to also deal with advertisers. So our promise is that it's as easy and low lift as possible.
So super advantageous for them to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, and we give them, when they sign with us, they're not on the hook for anything. They're basically just like, once we have an advertiser, they can veto it if they don't like the brand. Otherwise, just get it up and running, and they make the majority of the ad revenue. So that's really it from the musician's, a long answer, but from a musician's perspective. From an advertiser, I mean, I've worked on a lot of brands, especially when I think of HBO or, some of the liquor brands, where we wanted to be around live music, and it was often very cost prohibitive. There's of course like Live Nation and AEGs and some other more custom ways into music, but can be again expensive. You're tied into multi-year contracts. It's not really a plug in, plug out kind of way to get into live music. I mean, I remember some show we were promoting on HBO. We wanted to be around live music. So we bought a phone kiosk near Radio City Music Hall. I was like, that's our live music play. And it was always a dream to be like, what if we just could get inside these venues? Because inside these venues, you've already have this qualified audience of people. They've paid to be there. They're spending time 2 to 4 hours there. Independent venues specifically, unlike, some of the bigger, like an MSG, which obviously a huge audience, but you're going to get a lot of like, corporate people, the private boxes. You'll get a lot of people who just are well outside your target. Indie venues are very much like the tastemakers, Gen Z at this point, 18 to 34, cool people that are the ones that start trends. And we like to say that, like, if these are the fans that launch bands, they're the fans that can launch brands.
Like that. I like that a lot. And you kind of, bring up something I think that a lot of digital advertisers talk about. It's like, I want to grab attention, right? That's the big, like for the past couple of years, that's been the metric that, has been driving a lot of investment. So kind of your ethos here is that attention's happening in real life too. Like it doesn't have to be on a screen, and how do you capture that in a meaningful way? So when you look at this, and help me through this part here. So you're looking at these small venues, you're connecting with audiences in that moment. You have this niche kind of experience and relationship with them. And I love that you gave that example of Chapel Rowan, because that hits a very specific audience as well, right? That's like the Gen Z audience. How are you guys thinking about it, not just from the local level, but how does that then translate into scalability? So if I'm an advertiser, I'm a HBO, and I'm like, I really want to tap into this, but how does that look like for me to scale that up so it's worth my investment over time? How do you guys present yourself in that capacity?
Totally. Yeah. When the idea kind of first came to us, which wasn't a mind blowing idea or super revolutionary, it was basically just like, oh, what if during a set break there was a brand here? It seems like this kind of dead space, half an hour, and there's no, in a world where every possible canvas is an advertisement, um, it seemed like a missed opportunity, especially for the right brand. I mean, again, the last thing you want to do is just like slap some irrelevant message in front of people and turn them off. Like it needs to be additive. It needs to make sense for the life, for, the audience. But when and the reason why I kind of developed into a network, venue ad network, is because we know, having worked on many brands, like there's got to be the scale, and never has there been one entry point into the world of independent venues that is scalable. I mentioned some teams, some of the bigger venues in our network have sponsorship teams, and they're going out on their own. Many times they're getting, local breweries or THC companies or local banks, and they aren't necessarily thinking nationally because they might just be in Chicago. Whereas our whole pitch was like, what if we just bring all of these together in one single network, so that then we can offer it to an advertiser a la carte, or you can buy it nationally. And we offer advertisers the opportunity, through a variety of different inventory within those spaces. You can also buy by venue, you can buy it by city, region, or the whole thing nationally. And within the venues, the inventory itself is everything from screens. Most of the venues that we partner with have screens, whether that's on, flanking the stage or at the bar. We also offer wild postings and bathroom takeovers, and then all the way, we were partnered with an experiential agency, and we can do activations and sampling and street teams. And the whole idea is that we're the kind of one stop shop entry point into this world, as opposed to you as a brand having to go to multiple venues, deal with each of these different teams there. Um, and yeah, we were just surprisingly the first to kind of do this. Which, as we dug in, I mean, when we came up with the idea, we're like, surely something like this exists. Like, it's not outlandish. Like, and that's kind of the beauty of it, is that it's a good idea when you feel like it must exist already. And then we just kept digging into it, and we're like, no, I guess this. We know, having worked on it and having like promoted many different types of brands, that this is a really valuable space and this is a really valuable audience. Not to mention just this, you know, time, 2026, it's like it's hard to stand out. And you mentioned attention. It's really hard to get people's attention. And most brands, when they're going after this audience, are on social, and that's skippable. That's, they're just scrolling past. They're also not in like a necessarily a positive mindset.
Right. Like that emotional state's very different.
Yeah. So our thing was like, what if you could align your brand with someone's best night of the week, month, year? Like, this could be it, and your brand was there for it. So you're reaching this audience who, again, is already qualified. They're out, they're spending money, they're spending time, they're having a great time, and your brand is aligning with that moment. And one last thing I will say about attention, is just a really cool stat that, so much of my job as chief strategy officer is finding, proof points and ways to really make this resonate with brands and people in a real way that's like has some concrete data behind it. McKinsey came out with a report last October called the attention equation. And it's all about attention. It's just value, and they defined it as valuable time driven by focus and intent. So there's you can have time looking at an ad socially, but there's maybe less focus there, and there's certainly less intent. But one of the things that they called out in the study was that focused attention in a live environment. So taking a step, they valued moments uh, of what a media format could be. Like, they actually put a dollar amount onto seeing something on social versus live, and what they determined was that focused attention in a live environment can be worth up to 69 times more than a social impression. So the value of seeing something live and being in that moment is 69 times more than just scrolling by it.
Yeah, that's the ROI right there.
Yeah. And that's just general live environment. That's not even, we like to think that you add on a layer of music or comedy. You add in the layer of you are possibly at your favorite place that you've been going to through your whole life, and you have this amazing love for, and it's a special part of your identity. Like, all of those things start stacking up. So when you see something in one of those places, it's gonna get your attention a lot
Right.
more.
You're tapping into the human element, right? And I think so much so, even on this podcast, we talk a lot about the digitization of the human emotion, right? And advertisers just trying to chase that. And you're saying like, hey, why go and chase that in a digital format when it's right there in front of you? Just how do we tap into it in a smart way? So I agree with you there that like the algorithm driven advertising does have its place, but the refocus on what you're describing here sounds like it's paying off for brands. And
Yeah, and the way, you know I like to think, so there are the stats and the numbers like that, but then there's the real human element. I go to shows all the time, and I'm here in Portland, Maine, and where, right now it's February 2nd and it's like 2 degrees. And tonight, if I went out to the State Theater or to Aura or the Afodian or any of these venues, or Portland House of Music, chances are they're they're packed full of people for a band that, and I'm pretty up on music for a band I've never heard of. Like, it's happened to me time and time again where I am amazed at this world of people that are out and about that I just don't think people are aware that, in general, you might not think about because it's in a small room, it's behind a door, you don't even know, you walk by, you don't even know there's a whole show going in there. There's a whole world happening. And it's just amazing how many people there are. And again, I mentioned Portland, Maine, like this is not a big city and they're just out and about. And I'm like, that is such a valuable audience that took the time and spent the money and made the effort to get out of their house, out of the comfort of their house, away from their phones, away from the TV, away from the warmth of a fire, to go to these rooms. And I'm constantly amazed by that.
Yeah. No, that's the beauty of live music, right? It's what draws people in. I think some of my deepest and best memories here, just living in New York, has been at smaller live music venues. Some that I played, and some that I saw bands, like you said, that were unknown that blew up years later, and you're like, I remember those guys when they played that first song. Like, I mean, now I remember the Killers. They performed at like the Coney Island Mermaid Parade like years ago, and they played Mr. Brightside, and no one knew what the hell that was, and it was janky. And now you look at it, and it's like at every wedding. So like those memories and that connection that I have with those bands and that sonic experience, will last a lifetime. So, as we get towards some of the end of our conversation, I would love to hear your thoughts on how do you guys expand into the next phase of what you guys are doing in terms of the connection with the audience in the moment. Like, how do you, obviously we're an ad tech podcast, so you are tapping into real human experiences, but what are you guys thinking about, even if it's a long shot of like, what do you do in that room, in that moment, that brings another element to really, for not just the brand, but the consumer, drive home that connection, right? So have you guys thought about that? I'm sure you have, but love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly thinking about new ways that we can speak to this audience. I mean, the original idea was, what if there was just a projection of a logo on the curtains between sets? Just like you see at a hockey rink or at any stadium. There's just logos everywhere, and you don't really see that at any indie venues. And it obviously evolved since then. But going back to the projection thing specifically, I think there's some amazing technology with projection mapping. There are other just like hologram, very sci-fi cool things that we can do in these spaces that would get a lot of engagement. Um, we, really are focused on proving this out for the venues, getting them the money they deserve. They are our priority in terms of making sure they're happy with this. And our hope is that, in the years to come, they know we're good for it and we're on their side and we want genuinely to do what's best for them. So that, eventually we could experiment with some really cool things and do some different things. And, we talk a lot about building out, a more systematic, potentially programmatic way of delivering more of these materials. Cause right now it's venue by venue. We're sending them the assets. They're incorporating, like when it comes to the screens, for example, they're incorporating the asset into their existing house content, which is usually upcoming shows and things like that. So it's a cool format because people are looking at this to get information about upcoming bands that they might love, and then there's an ad in the middle. So it's not just a screen dedicated to ads, but there is a way to make that a lot easier, certainly on us, if we were to really connect them all programmatically or just through the same piping. Um, Again, though, as we're relatively new company, we want to make sure that the venues see the value here and uh, know that we've got their interests at heart before we, go any deeper there. And if that's not the nature of what we offer, then that's not what we offer. I mean, we have spoken with a lot of different measurement companies. We have, on hand ways to measure who's coming in, who's coming out, like what the demo is, what the foot traffic is, all these things. But we're also like we're not the same as a programmatic, buy. You're not coming to us because you want like, acquisitions and you want these very specific clicks or anything like that. It's more upper funnel, just being like part of culture when it starts, being there with the right people. And it's more brand affinity metrics, relevance, likability, like cool factor, things like that. So we like to kind of just say that up front. Like if you're looking at us like a programmatic buy or like a social buy, we're not that. We're more just a unique and real way to get attention with the right people. And you may not necessarily see immediate results.
Yeah, but that's brand building, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's all brand building.
the point. You look at the funnel, and it's like, every not every partner out there is meant to drive that, conversion level metric. I think part of our theme today is like, I think the digital advertising ecosystem's just been so hell bent on that final step in the process, right? Because we can measure so many things, and I like that. Your company looks at it from the angle like, before you even get to that point, you need to draw those audiences and consumers in. You need them to be on your side, and
And
to your
that stuff's important, obviously, but that's just not, if you're coming to us, that's not our priority necessarily. Assuming you're doing that elsewhere on the plan, we just want to be a nice complement to the plan. When we started out, we were just like, we just want to be a little. We used to say it all the time when I was planning, like, oh, what are the kind of bells and whistles on this plan? Like, we want to be the bell and the whistle. We're not, we're just asking for like, what's that, like 5 to 10% of your media plan where you're kind of experimenting, you're trying something out, because yeah, go for what works, but that has like incremental gains and you kind of know what to predict there. And I don't feel like enough brands are really going out and trying something a little different. And I understand that. I mean, it's hard to try something new. It takes a lot of work. You got to vet it. You got to there's a lot of trust there, and I totally understand that. But the rewards are so much greater if you're willing to kind of take that risk. And so much of what we offer versus something like a Live Nation is just a much lower cost of entry. We offer tests, we offer pilots, things where it's just like, just dip your toes in the water, see what you think, see what works. You're not on the hook for anything. Our minimum buy is 30 days, as it would be like with a any outdoor unit. But beyond that, that's it. You're not locked into anything. So we want to prove it out and work with brands that are cool and willing to go along the ride with us.
Jared, I love it, man. I think you guys are doing a good thing.
Thanks, man.
I like the human element to it. Like I said, I'm a big live music guy. I know we're at the end of our conversation here, and I had a kind of a pop quiz. Throw it out there. Feel free to answer it. Feel free not to. But knowing you're the music guy, like what are three bands you're listening to right now that are?
Man, it's so
I know.
funny when like,
I had to.
no, it's great. It's great. It's like in my mind, I have to prepare myself sometimes for those questions. Because I listen to so much, but then I'm like, when asked this question, like I don't know how many times I've just like I freeze up and I'm like, what is music? Um, but like in the past few years, like major artists that I've really loved are Medium Build, this band called Howdy, which is HOVVDY. Man, so many bands. This other band, Kinship, KINNSHIP, which is, I think they're Scandinavian. I think it's really just one dude. But I love obviously some of the bigger bands like Killers and Tame Impala and stuff like that. But I'm always on the hunt for new music. I kind of love a lot of the much of the indie genre, although that indie genre spans from everything from like super polished electronic produced music to rough, kind of folksy, quiet stuff. I mean, like
Runs
Elliott
the
Smith.
spectrum now. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
The initial indie like extravaganza back in like the 2010s where like every
Yeah, yeah.
that ship now all of a sudden just feels like, was that indie? I can't really tell
I
anymore.
know, right, right. Like Phoenix, like a band like Phoenix, which I love. You're like, it's not. I mean, you say it's kind of indie, but it's like super pop, synth
Yeah, it's on
poppy kind
car
of.
commercials now. How could
Yeah,
that be?
exactly.
Yeah. So, I hear you. I think I'll just share one of mine that I've been listening
Yeah,
to a lot
please.
lately. I love this guy. His name's Goth Babe. I don't know if you're
Oh
familiar.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love his story, what he's doing. He's like a lot of his music, the proceeds go to kind of trying to save the planet. And he's on this boat in the Mediterranean, I think he is now, and he's just writing music with his dog. Like it's just really
Super
like
cool.
chill. Yeah, super cool, and I love the ethos behind it.
I like that vibe of music. It's sort of it's like a shoegazy surf rock kind of. Other bands like that in that vein that I like are like Beach Fossils, Real Estate, Daywave.
Daywave. I haven't listened to that guy's in a minute.
Yeah. So yeah, I hear you, man. I'm with
Awesome.
you.
Well, man, I appreciate the chat today. It's been great having you on, and I wish you and Abby, of course, a lot of luck in everything that you're doing. And I'd love to check back in at a future date, see how things have evolved. And to everyone out there, seek them out. Venue Ad Network or Van, Jared McCarthy, co-founder, chief strategy officer. Thanks for your time today, man.
Thank you, John. This is great. Bye.